CNBC presents Power Lunch with Bill Griffin and Michelle Caruso Cabrera.
Interest rates remain at some of the lowest levels we have seen in more than 40 years. And that has helped make the bond market strong for quite some time. But there's a big question now as to whether the Treasury bond market could be the next bubble to burst. Joining us is financial planner Mark Brown, a partner with the firm Brown and Tedstrom. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you. A
lot of people assume that Treasuries are extremely safe because their principal is protected. But if there were a big downturn in the bond market right now, what would happen to, say, someone's portfolio who's heavily invested in bonds?
Well, if you think over the last couple of years, bonds have done so well as compared to stocks, except for this year, of course. And so a lot of money's moved over there. But at 40-year lows, and everybody's refinancing their mortgages, sort of they're ringing the bell saying it might be over for that. So a 2% increase in 10-year Treasury would be a 15% loss in that bond portfolio.
Wow, that's a very big decline considering.
Right, and a 30-year bond, if it did the same thing, would go down by 25%. And that's not why people buy bonds.
Mm-hmm.
They don't buy bonds to be excited.
Absolutely not. But is there something that people can do instead?
Well, there's it depends on what your main priority is. If it's income, certainly there's other vehicles that provide a higher yield. If it's liquidity, then there's only really one alternative, and that's very, very short-term bonds or very short-term bond funds. Mm-hmm. But if you're looking for income, REITs are still paying 6 to 8%. High-yield bonds are paying somewhere in the same range, although different risk class.
Okay.
The other thing that you can do is you can pay stuff off if you have loans, even though it's a great time to borrow. If you really are using your portfolio to live off of, maybe that's a better thing to do is pay off mortgages or other loans. Also consider that pension plans, things that pay you cash flow, that's like a bond substitute as well. Something's paying you $5,000 a year, it's like having $100,000 in bonds. So consider that when you consider your overall investment portfolio and asset allocation.
Let's take some questions. Mike in Washington State, go ahead. What's your question?
The difference between hospital revenue bonds versus general obligation bonds?
The difference between hospital revenue bonds and general obligation bonds?
Gigantic difference. Anytime you hear revenue bond in a bond offering, what it means is that that enterprise itself, the success of that hospital financially will determine the success of how that bond works. So if the hospital works, then you'll probably get paid. If for some reason the hospital can't pay off that debt, that mortgage, then you might be stuck holding the bag. Versus a general obligation bond or GO bond is generally a general obligation of the state, so that you have the full taxing authority of the state to be able to pay it back. So doesn't mean that revenue bonds are bad, just again a different risk class.
And not necessarily just hospitals, right?
There's road bonds, there's subdivision bonds, and each one has to be measured and evaluated as to the business element of that bond.
Let's get another question. Mark in California, go ahead.
Is there a mutual fund that profits when bond prices drop?
There are funds out there, just like there's mutual funds that go up or stock funds that go up when the market goes down, where they use derivatives to have this counterbalancing or this opposite relationship to what's actually happening, and absolutely you can buy those.
And so contact your financial planner to ask about them?
Yes, they're definitely out there.
All right. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Mark Brown is a certified financial planner and partner with the firm Brown and Tedstrom.